and comments, which is the post.children. And now we can go ahead and create this thread card. So it's going to be a new component, this time within components, and then cards. It's going to be called thread card.tsx. Inside of here, we can create a new const thread card, which is going to be a functional component. And we already know that we're getting some props. So which props are we getting? Well, all of these right here. So you can hold Alt, or I believe it is Option on Mac, and you can copy all of these. And then press Ctrl C or Command C to copy it. And you can destructure them right here from props. And of course, we have to provide commas after each one. There we go. Now we have to say that this is of a type is equal to props. So we need to define the interface of props right here at the top by saying interface props. And then we need to define what each one of these types is. So the ID is going to be of a type is string. Then we have the current user ID, which is also a string. We have a parent ID, which is either a string or a null, as we discussed before. The content is going to be of a type string. Author is going to be more complicated. It's going to be an object with a name equal to string, an image equal to string as well, and also an ID equal to string. By creating these specific types, we're going to immediately know what values do we have access to when we read those props. Then I noticed that here, I should have put this sign right here to say or. And then after that, we have community. Community is also going to have an ID of string, a name of string, and then image of string. Or it's going to be null. So maybe we don't have community if it doesn't belong to one. Created at is going to be a string, and comments is going to be an array. So we can say comments, and comments is going to have an author, which is going to have an image of a type string. In this case, we don't yet have to show the actual comment. We just have to show who the commenters are, because this is just a general thread card and not the thread details page where we can read all of the comments. And then we can add the array sign here to indicate that we're going to have multiple comments. And then finally is comment, which is going to be a Boolean, and it's not required. So that's going to look like this. And now we can collapse this. So finally, now that we're getting these props, we can return an article. Again, this is like a div, but it's an HTML5 semantic tag, which we usually use for cards. Immediately, let's try to show some content. The content we can show is the text itself. So we can render maybe an h2, give it a class name equal to text-small-regular and text-light-2. And within it, we can render what? It's going to be content of that specific thread. Now, if we save this and go back, of course, we have to import the thread card. And to import it, we have to first export default thread card. And then what we have to do is we have to import it right here, which is coming from add/components/cards/thread card. Now it complains a bit, saying cannot find thread card, even though we imported it at the top, but it looks like this is good. So now the error is gone, but it's complaining about the current user, saying that this could potentially be null. Interesting. TypeScript is trying to save us here. So let's see what we can do. Well, we can say user ID, or it's going to be an empty string. So this way, it's always going to be a string that's getting passed in. And there we go. We can see one of our first posts. Next.js 13 is great, especially server components and use server directive. This is great. We can close the additional tabs that we have opened, as well as the console. I might as well update my Chrome. But the point is, we can now get started with creating the layout of our card, and everything is slowly starting to make sense. So let's continue with the card structure. First, let's provide a class name to the article itself, which is the actual card. And it can be a flex container, w-full for full width, flex-col, so the elements appear one on top of another, rounded-xl, and bg-dark-2, as well as a padding of 7. Now, if we save this, and there we go. So now it is an actual card. But let's make the contents inside of it look even better. So right here within the article, we're going to create another div that's going to be a container of flex, items-start, and the justify-between. Inside of it, we can have another div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, w-full, flex-1, flex-row, and gap-4. And inside of it, finally, we can have another div which is going to contain a link that's actually going to be an image, the profile photo. So it's going to have a class name equal to flex, flex-col, and items-center. Finally, now that we have the structure, we can put a link within it. And this link is going to come from next/link. Of course, every single link needs to have an href property. And this time it's going to be dynamic. So we can say /profile / and then author.id. So it's going to link to the profile of the creator of the thread. And it can have a class name equal to relative, h-11, and w-11 for height and width. Finally, within it, we can render a self-closing image tag, and image is of course coming from next/image. Let's give it a source property equal to author.image, an alt tag equal to profile image, fill, and then class name equal to cursor-pointer, as well as rounded-full as profile images usually are. Now, if we save this, I reloaded the page and there we go. So already this is looking much better, but now below this link, we can render a self-closing div. And this div is going to have a class name equal to thread-card_bar. So now if we save this, it just provided some more space. What we can do is we can check out this class name and what it does by going to search. And then here you can see it's just going to apply margin top, grow, rounded full, and a neutral background. Now below the div we created and below one more div, we're going to create another div. And here we want to render the author's name. So right here, we can render a link property and it's going to point to the same link that we had before. So we can copy this entire link and paste it here. href profile author. But we don't have to have the relative class name here. It can simply say w-fit for the width. And within it, we're going to have an h4. And for now, it can simply render the author.name. And it's going to have a class name equal to cursor-pointer to make it appear that we can click on it to go to the profile page, text-base-semi-bold, as well as text-light-1. So now if we save this, you should be able to see Adrian appear right here, as that is the name of my account. And of course, we have to make it make sense with the image. So let's give it a class name equal to flex w-full, as well as a flex-col. So now if we look at it, it's going to appear more nicely with the other content that we're going to add around it. So now we go below the link and we have a p tag. And this p tag is going to render the content of the thread. So we can give it a class name of mt-2 to divide it a bit from the top, text-small-regular, and text-light-2. And considering that we now have our content, we no longer need our h2 that we had before. So if we now save it, you can see it more nicely fits inside of here. Now, below that p tag, we can create another div. And that div is going to have a class name equal to mt-5 for margin top, flex, flex-call, and gap-3. Inside of it, we want to have some usual social media icons, such as hearts, reply, repost, and so on. So let's simply create a div that's going to contain all of these icons. And this div is going to have a class name equal to flex and gap 3.5. Inside of there, we can render our first image, or rather an icon. This image is going to have a source equal to /assets /heart-gray.svg. It's going to have an alt tag equal to heart, a width equal to 24, as well as a height equal to 24, and a class name equal to cursor-pointer and object-contain. Now, if we save this, you should be able to see our heart icon appear right here. And now you can see this div, which is actually a line pointing down. This is going to indicate that we can have later on more comments attached to this thread, which is what threads is all about. Of course, I'm talking about this thread card bar. This is adding that line right here. Now let's duplicate this image 3 or 4 times so we can show some other stuff as well. The second one is going to be the reply. So we can say assets and then reply, change this to reply as well. Then we can have repost below. That's going to be the third one. And then finally, we can have the share button. Now, if we save this, you can see 4 different icons appear right here. The only one that's going to be working in our case is going to be the comment button. So we can wrap the second one, the second image, within a link tag. So let's do a link and put this image within that link and indent it properly. This link is going to have an href pointing to /thread/ID. So it's going to point to the details page of that thread so we can then comment on it. And nothing is going to change visually. This is great. Of course, if you want to, I have an extra challenge for you. If this video isn't complicated enough, implement the like functionality. Heck, implement the repost and share functionalities as well. That is what JSM is all about, empowering you to build your own projects. Now, with that said, below our thread, or rather below this div containing all of these images, we have to figure out if the threads we're rendering are comments. Because as we said, a comment is a thread and a thread is a comment. But we have top level threads, which are general ones, right? And then we can have comment threads attached to it. So we have to figure it out. And how can we do that? Well, we are passing the thread card, and there we have the ID, comments, and all that good stuff, but we don't have a specific is comment functionality like I believe we said we will have right here, is comment. So by default, this is going to be undefined because we're not passing it at all. So let's simply specify it is comment, and at the start it's going to be undefined. But if we render this thread card later on as a comment, we can then pass this variable and say that it is true. So let's go down and say if is comment and comments.length is greater than 0, only then do we show this section. And that section is going to be a link that's going to point to the same one that pointed here, thread details right here. And what do we put in there? Well, we can put a p tag that's going to say comments.length. And then we can say replies, which is going to look like this. Now, of course, we have to give it a class name equal to margin top 1 to divide it from the top, text-subtle-medium, as well as text-gray-1. If we save this, you should now not be able to see anything, but we will soon enough. We'll also add additional functionalities, so you'll be able to see the photos of the people that replied, as well as the number of replies, and then even when the post was created, alongside the community it belongs to. So some pretty cool stuff is coming our way, but for now, I believe this is good enough for our thread card. So now let's go ahead and go to create another just to see if everything truly works. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to write me a tweet about the power of Next 13. And there we go. It gave us something cool. Let's copy that, paste it here, and let's, without even reading it, post it. I guess that's how the people in the AI revolution just do social media. And now you can see that it didn't automatically show up here, so we have to reload. And I believe it's going to work immediately on the deployed version, but no worries, we're gonna look into that later on. So far, this is great. We have 2 of our posts. So the next thing we can do is the thread details page, which we don't have as of now. So we can go to the app and then root, and then create a new folder called thread. And within it, create a new folder with square brackets ID, and then create a new file within it called page.tsx. That's how we do dynamic routing in Next.js, because we want to read this ID at the top. And we can start creating that. This is going to allow us to add comments to it, which is going to be another interesting functionality which we can add. So here we can say const page is equal to, and this is going to be an arrow function, which we can immediately export default. Then we know we're going to get some params out of it. And in Next.js, how do we get the params out of the URL? Well, you do it like this. You destructure it, you get the params, and within the params, you're going to have the ID. So we can say that the type of this is going to be params, where we have an ID of a type string. This is it. So now this allows us to start creating the structure of our thread details page. So let's create a section, and this section is going to have a class name equal to relative. And within it, we're going to have a div. And within the div, believe it or not, we're going to render our thread card, which we already created. So we can go back to our homepage and copy the thread card. And we can paste it right here within the div. And of course, we want to format this properly and indent it. So I'm holding Alt and then clicking, and now I can move it all right here. Now, of course, we have to import the thread card component, which we were working so hard on to create. But of course, we also have to get those post details or the thread details. So how are we going to do that? Well, we can immediately start at the top. We can say if no params.id, we can return null. If we do have the params ID, we also need to have a user. And you already know the drill. How do we get the user? Well, we import current user coming from add clerk / Next.js. Then we can say const user is equal to await current user. And if we don't have a user, we can again return null. Then we have to turn this into an async function since we're using await, which is pretty cool that Next.js allows us to do it like this. And then we also have to fetch the user data from our own database. So we can say const user info is equal to await fetch user. And this is the function that we have already created coming from lib actions user actions. And we can pass in the user.id. Why are we doing this? Well, we're doing it to check if user info dot onboarded is true. So we can say if no user info dot onboarded, in that case, we want to redirect to onboarding, or rather to / onboarding. And it looks like I'm missing a return statement right here. So we can say return this entire section. This redirect is coming from Next navigation as well, so we can import it right here at the top. But now you might be wondering, where are we going to get this post from? Or as a matter of fact, it would be better to call it thread. So I'm going to modify all of this into thread those things. Where are we going to get this thread data from? How are we going to know on which thread are we currently on? Well, for that, we're going to have to do something like this. Const thread is equal to await fetch thread by ID, and we have to pass the params.id, which we're getting right here at the top from the URL bar. Of course, this function doesn't exist yet, so we can go back into our thread actions right here, and we can implement the third action in a row, which is going to be fetch thread by ID. So export async function, fetch thread by ID, and of course is going to accept an ID of a type string. At the start, we have to connect to DB, a well-known process by this point. Then we open up a try and catch block, and we try to fetch a thread by saying const thread is equal to await thread dot find by ID, and we pass in the ID. Then we need to populate it by saying dot populate. We need to give it the author information. So path is equal to author, model is equal to user, and we can select which fields do we need from the author. It's going to be underscore ID, ID, name, and image. Later on in here, we'll also want to populate its community. So for now, I'm going to add a to-do here for myself, populate community. But what we can populate now is going to be the children, which are the comments. And this does get a bit complicated. Let me show you why. We can say dot populate, and then we have to go a couple of levels deep. We first populate the children, and then we call another populate that's going to be an array where each child, meaning each child thread, gets populated with the author of that specific comment, right? A model, that's a user. For each one of these, we want to select specific properties like underscore ID, name, parent ID, and the image. And then we want to populate the thread comment itself. So we can say path is children, model is going to be thread, populate is going to be author, model user, and then we want to select ID, ID name, parent ID. So this is getting complicated, right? We need to do this because we have many levels deep, and we want to know that is a comment on another thread. So as I said, it goes recursively. It's going to make much more sense once you see it in action, but we can also see it a bit on a finished site. Here we have a thread, right? We have to get the data for that thread. But once we get the data for the thread, you also have to fetch the profile icon for the sub-comments as well as the comments of the comments. Here we have a reply on a comment. So this is getting complicated, but it is a multi-level commenting functionality, which is pretty cool. So take some time, try to understand this. We're going to go through this later on once we actually implement the commenting functionality. And finally, you can call the .exec, which is execute on this specific query. And then you can return that thread. In case there's an error, we can simply say console.error or throw new error, error fetching the thread, and then console log the error message and make the error of an any type. And this is it when it comes to our fetch thread by ID functionality, but we must not forget this populate community as well, because we have to fetch the data for the community of this post as well. Otherwise, we're not going to have it on the front end. Now, with that said, this function is now created and we can import it from add/lib actions thread actions, which is great. And now we are passing that data over to our thread card. So now if we go back to our website, as you can see, the first part of the thread details page is now done because it is essentially just the post itself, which we already have on the home page. But we had to do that. We have to start somewhere, right? And now the main part of the post details page are the actual comments. Not only the ability to see the comments, but the ability for you to add a reply. So let's add that next. Below this div, we can create another div. And this div is going to have a class name of mt-7, meaning margin top 7, to divide it from the top. And within it, we're going to render the comment self-closing component. So we can go to our components. This is going to be actually a form for our comment form. So we can say comment.tsx, and there we can create a functional component. You can do function comment like this, or you can do a regular const comment. There really isn't any difference. And you can do export default comment at the bottom. Now, for now, this comment can simply return something like a div where we can say h1 comment form. And of course, we have to give it a class name equal to text-white, just so we can see that right there. And now we can import it right here from comments forms comment. And on our website, you can see this comment form. To this comment form, we'll have to pass a couple of props. We first have to pass the thread ID to know which thread are we commenting on. So that is going to be thread ID is equal to thread.id. Then we want to pass the current user image, which is coming from user.image URL. Why do we have to do that? Well, to show it right here. And this is thankfully coming from Clerk, so that we know that we are the one currently commenting. And finally, we have to pass the current user ID, which is going to come from the database user info dot underscore ID. And I believe that the underscore ID is not really a string. It could be a special MongoDB object. So just to be sure, I'm going to wrap it in a JSON.stringify function. And that way we know that we're working with a string. Now we can move into our comment and we can accept all of these props within it. So we know that we're going to get a thread ID, a current user image, or IMG as we passed it, and a current user ID. And that's going to look like this. Of course, that's going to be of a type props. We can pull our editor a bit here so we can see more of what we're building. As a matter of fact, we can move this here because we can still see the comments in our mobile view. Now, we can define those props as an interface at the top by saying interface props thread ID is a string, current user image is a string, as well as current user ID is a string as well. And we are ready to start creating our form. It's not our second form, I believe, it's a third one. And all of them follow a similar structure, so you already know what you need to do, but let's do it together one more time. When we were creating the second form, we referenced the first one. Now we're creating the third one, and we can reference the second one, which is the form thread one. So from here, we can get almost everything, I believe. The button, the form. So let's first get the entire JSX part of it, which is just the form, right? And we can move that form to the comment right here. Of course, it's going to complain that not a lot of imports are here, but no worries. Let's continue getting some more things, such as the onSubmit, as well as the form, the router, and the path name. So we can put that right here above the return. And then we can get all the imports as well. So we can copy the imports as well as the use client because we're going to need it. Whenever you're working with forms, you're going to need a use client because it's a browser event. And now we can paste it here. Now, we won't need all of these things, and some imports are going to be different, but let's take it step by step. We need Z from Zod because that's for our validation. We need the use form hook. In this case, instead of a text area, we're going to need an input. So we can simply get an input over here. We need a button, but we have it here already. Now, instead of a thread validation, we're going to use a comment validation. But if you remember, we have already created it. They're so similar. So we should already have it in our thread.ts file. And then, of course, we won't need create thread. Later on, we're going to need the add comment to thread functionality, but more on that later. So for now, we can replace this with comment validation. In this case, we don't need the account ID. Here we can also say comment validation. And we can comment out the part of the onSubmit. And as you can see, we have a text area here, but here we want to switch it to an input that's going to have a type equal to text. And we don't need rows here, but we do need a placeholder that's going to say comment ... and we can give it a class name equal to no focus text-light-1 as well as outline-none. Now, if we save this, I hope we'll be able to see our form. And there it is. It's quite similar to what we had in the create thread, but of course, we're going to modify it so it looks like this. We want it to be horizontal, of course, the profile image on the left, the comment form in the center, and then the reply button on the right. So let's go ahead and modify the JSX offer form to suit our needs. We can do that by giving this form a class name of simply comment-form. Already, this is going to make it look a bit closer, but now we can modify the form field. The form field is going to say thread, because think about it, we are creating a thread. Then instead of the render, we're going to have the form item. Inside of the form item, we're going to have a form label. And then inside of the label, we're going to have an image. Image has to be imported from next/image. And we can give it a source equal to current user image. This is coming from clerk. We can give it an alt tag equal to current user or just profile image, whatever you prefer. A width of 48 and a height of 48 as well. Finally, a class name of rounded-full, which we need whenever we're working with profile photos, and object cover. Now, if we save this, you can see our JSM logo or your own profile photo, which is pretty cool. And now we have the form control. This form control simply can have a border-none as well as a BG-transparent. And now if we save this, you can see it's looking a bit closer, but still it feels like it's not fitting in here. So let's figure out why is that. In this case, we don't need a form message, so we can remove it. And in the form item, we don't need flex call because we want elements to appear one next to another. And then we can also say items-center. If we save this, as you can see, we're getting there. And we can remove the class name from the form label because we don't have text inside of it. We just have the photo, which doesn't need any additional styling. And let's modify the button. It's going to be type submit. And we can give it a class name of comment-form_btn. This is going to give it this special look. And we can simply say reply. This is going to make it fit in one line. And there we go. This is it. It's looking exactly like it does on the finished version. So that means that now we are ready to leave a comment. Or are we? Of course, this is now the part where we have to go to the onSubmit and we have to create the backend functionality for creating a comment. So let's go to our thread actions. And yes, we are still in the thread actions because as discussed before, a comment is a thread. So we can say export async function, add comment to thread, and it's going to accept a couple of props. It's going to accept a thread ID, which is going to be of a type string. And we don't have that many, so we can leave them in a regular function. Usually you can use an object as we defined before. We can have a comment text, which is going to be a string as well, a user ID of a type string, and a path of a type string. Immediately within it, we of course want to connect to DB, and then we can open up a try and catch block. In the catch, we can say something like throw new error, error adding comment to thread, where we console log the error.message. But in the try, we can focus on the logic of adding a comment. Now, think about it. How do we add a comment? Well, first we have to find the original thread by its ID. So we can say const original thread is equal to await thread dot find by ID, and we pass in the thread ID coming through params. If we don't have an original thread, then we can simply throw a new error saying thread not found. Finally, we have to create a new thread with the comment text. So that's going to be const comment thread is equal to new thread. How cool is this? We already have the model and the instance of the thread, so it's going to be pretty simple to just create it and turn it into a comment. So what does our thread have? It has the text, which is the comment text. It has the author, which is equal to user ID, and it has the parent ID, which is the thread ID. That is the ID of the original thread that we're commenting on. Now we want to save the comment thread to the database. Save the new thread. And we can do that by saying const saved comment thread is equal to await comment thread dot save. Then we want to update the original thread to include the new comment by saying original thread dot children dot push. And we want to push the saved comment thread dot underscore ID. And finally, we want to save the original thread by saying await original thread dot save, and then we want to revalidate the path so that it shows instantly. Pretty cool stuff, right? We already reused the majority of the functionality because we already have the thread logic done, but now we're applying it to adding a comment. So let's give it a shot. Let's call our add comment to thread, and let's pass the thread ID, comment text, user ID, and the path. That's going to happen in the comment form, where we can now await, not create thread, but add comment to thread, which is coming from lib actions thread actions. And now we're not going to pass this as an object. We just have to pass the values one by one. So first we can pass the thread ID, which we already have access to. Then we have the values dot thread, which is the actual value. Then we can JSON dot parse the current user ID as well as the path name. And this path name is just the current URL. And finally, we do a form dot reset if you want to add yet another comment. Now let's give it a shot. Here, we're talking about something cool about next 13, but let's say write a mad comment to that tweet saying Next.js 13 is bad. There we go. Sorry, but I disagree. Next 13 might seem flashy, but it's nothing but hype. Okay, this is pretty cool. So let's copy this and let's add it as a comment right here and click reply. We immediately get an error. It looks like Next is not going to allow us to talk badly about it. But let's see. We have a throw new error, error adding commented thread, cannot read properties of undefined reading push. Okay, this is interesting. So let's go back to post thread and to thread actions. And where do we have the push? Here. Original thread that children. This right here was supposed to be children. So if we fix this, hopefully I will now be able to click reply one more time. And the form reset happened, which I'm guessing means that the comment went through. So before we actually implement the logic of checking it out, we can go back to our MongoDB database and see if it's there. Back in Atlas, we can go to our cluster 0, collections, threads, and then we should have 3 threads here. And we do. Sorry, but I have to disagree. And it seems like it went through 2 times because even the original one worked. So no worries, we can easily delete the second instance of it right here in the database. So we have just 1. So now I'm guessing it's going to have a parent ID. And does the original one have the children? Oh, I cannot seem to see the child getting added right here. It's possible because we deleted the wrong one. So let's simply just try to give the same comment one more time. And now if we go back and if we refresh, go to threads, we have 3. We can see that it has a parent ID, and this one doesn't seem to have children. But I just figured out I'm looking for the children in the wrong one. We should be looking at the one with the rocket emoji. And this one is here. And this one still has 2 children. Even though we only have 1, that's because of the error that happened at the start. But no worries, we can delete this entire thread and just try it one more time. Just to be sure, right? We're gonna delete the comment as well. There we go. So now we have 1. We can go back to homepage. We can see 1. We can go to create thread, and we can post the same good one talking about next 13. And then we can comment on it. And now if we go back and refresh, you can see we have 3. This one has 1 child, and it is the 405. 405, it's looking good. So now let's actually list out the comments below the thread. That should look something like this. So let's get started. We can close all of the currently open files besides the page.tsx that is within the thread. So now we go below by creating a new div that's going to have a class name equal to empty-10 for margin top. And then we render the thread children. So we can say thread.children.map, where we get each individual child item of a type any is okay for now. And then we can just return what? Well, it's going to be, believe it or not, a thread card. And we already have this thread card here, so we can copy everything and we can simply paste it over here. But we'll have to modify all of this thread to child item. So let's simply say child item here. And let's see if we have to add any additional functionalities. We have to say is comment, which is a Boolean variable set to true to indicate that we can modify something within this thread card. Great. So there we go. Another thread appeared, indicating that this is a comment to the original one. But as you can notice, the layout should be a bit different, right? It should mean that this is the original one and these are comments added to it. And here it looks like we just have 2. So let's fix that. Let's go into the thread card and let's modify the original article by making this class name dynamic. Everything is going to be fine, but we can make a check. We can see if is comment. If that is the case, we can add padding x0 on extra small devices, padding x7, and usually we're going to add this bg dark 2 and p7. So that's only going to be here as the second part of this ternary operation. There we go. So now if we save this, you can notice that it indicates that this is a comment and this is the original. Although it's a bit weird because we have the same logo appearing in all the places. I also noticed that the image is different because this one is being picked up from Clerk, and here we have the one from our database. So if we go to our thread, here we can pass in the user info and then dot, what does it have? The image URL, I believe. Let's check it out. No, it's not image URL. Let's check our model to know how did we store it by going to models, user. It is going to be just image. So let's go back and say image right here. This should get the correct one of our user. I reloaded and it appeared. So this is pretty cool now. We are rendering the first comment that we have, although this is a bit weird because I'm disagreeing with myself here. But hopefully we're going to fix that once more of you come onto our platform. Great. Now, what do you think we should do next? We can do search, which is pretty cool. We can also do activities, we can do communities, and we can do profile. There's a lot of stuff that we are yet to add. I believe profile is the next reasonable step because it's going to allow us to see all of our threads, but also later on navigate to profiles of other users. So in the root, let's create a new profile folder, and within it, we're going to have the ID, which is of course going to be within square brackets, indicating it is dynamic, just as our thread. And we can render a page.tsx right within it. Our profile is going to be another page, another asynchronous functional component. We can return a section, and we can say profile. Of course, we can do export default page as well. Now, if we save this, and if we click somewhere where we can go to the profile, I believe on this profile photo as well, or just clicking here, it's going to lead us to this empty page, which means that now we are ready to start implementing the profile page. As with the create thread, we'll have to figure out if we currently have a user and if that user has onboarded, because only then we can go to the profile page. So let's navigate to create thread page. And inside of here, we'll be able to copy the imports as well as these first few checks that we're making. So let's go ahead and copy everything from here to here, and we can paste it right here. So we're importing the fetch user from user actions, the current user, and the redirect. And this is going to be everything that we need so far. But what are we going to do within our post page? Well, here, when we fetch the user info, we won't be fetching the ID of the currently logged in user, because maybe sometimes we're looking at the profile page of another user. And that's exactly why we're passing this user ID in the navigation bar. So right here in the profile, we can destructure the params, which Next.js provides us, and we can say that the params is going to contain an object with an ID of a type string. And then instead of providing user.id, which is the currently logged in user, we can provide params.id, whichever one we are currently checking out. Great. Now we're going to have a section, and then we want to render a component called a profile header, which is going to contain these sorts of things. So there we can simply render a self-closing profile header component that's going to look something like this. Of course, this is going to be a new component, so we can go to components, shared, and then create a new profile header.tsx. There we can simply create a new const profile header is equal to a component, or rather a functional component that's going to have a return, where we're going to have a div, and there we can render an h1 that's going to say profile header. And of course, we can do export default profile header. Now we have to import this back in here by double clicking, pressing Control space, and then importing it from @/components, shared, and then profile header. And we'll need to pass some additional params or props to it. So let's pass the account ID of the user we're looking at. So that's going to be userinfo.id. Let's also pass the auth user ID. This is going to allow us to figure out if the currently logged in user is the one looking at their own profile right now, or if they're looking at somebody else's. Then we have the name, which is userinfo.name. We have the username, which is userinfo.username. We have the img URL, which is userinfo.image. And finally, we have a bio, which is userinfo.bio. Now we can dive into the profile and accept all of these props at the top. That's going to look like this. We can just destructure them: account ID, auth user ID, name, username, img URL, bio, and this is all that we have for now. These can go in one line or multiple lines, whatever you prefer. I think they can nicely fit like this. And then we have to say this is of a type props. And then at the top, we can define an interface props. And now we can add account ID of a type string, auth user ID of a type string, name of a type string, username of a type string, image URL of a type string, and bio of a type string. And we have everything we need to start creating this profile card or the header. So let's get started by creating the structure using a couple of divs. And let's go back to our application that we're working on right now. So let's give it a class name equal to flex, w-full, flex-call, and justify-start. Within it, let's create a new div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, items-center, and justify-between. And within it, we can have another div that's going to have a class name equal to flex, items-center, and gap-3. You might be wondering, why do we have so many divs? But this is just to create the desired structure. We have to have a structure for the image, and then we put the username and the name side by side, and then the description or bio below. Finally, we can have one last div that's going to unwrap our image. So within it, let's create a new self-closing image tag that we can import from next image. And we can give it a source equal to img URL, an alt tag equal to profile image, a fill property, as well as a class name equal to rounded-full, object-cover, and shadow-2xl. Now, if we save this and go back and reload the page, you can see a huge profile photo appear right here. And that's why we usually wrap an image in a div when working in Next.js, because we can give it a class name equal to relative, h-20, w-20, and then object-cover. And this is now going to wrap our image and make it smaller. And now we can continue with adding the other info by going below this div, creating another one. And this one is just going to have a class name equal to flex-1. And it's going to have an h2 that's going to render the name. Of course, to be able to see this name, we have to give it a class name equal to text-left, text-heading 3-bold, and text-light-1. And we can save it. Now you can see this name, and right below the name, we want to have a p tag that's going to render the ad, and then we can render the username. Of course, we also have to give it a class name equal to text-base-medium, as well as text-gray-1, and we can save it. There we go. This is looking much better, and then we just have to render the bio. Then we can go 2 divs down. Later on, if we're looking at the community profile, then here we'll be able to render to-do community. But for now, we can just move over down to the bio, and that's going to be a p tag that's going to render the bio, and it's going to have a class name equal to margin top 6, max-w-lg for max width, text-base-regular, and text-light-2. And right below it, we're going to have a self-closing div that's going to have a class name equal to margin top 12, h-0.5, so just 0.5 height, w-full, and then bg dark 3. If we save this, this is now going to add the bio, as well as this line, which is barely visible, but it definitely differentiates the header from the content below. Now, of course, this is not really looking good, and that's because we have to go one more div outside with these elements. So we can move this div at the end all the way here to close it before, and then we have the p tag and the div outside of one of those divs. And if we save it, you can see it jumps down because it's no longer in the flex container. Great. With that, we can now start rendering the tabs, which we can switch between and then see all of our different threads. And I want to mention that all of this is going to be reusable. We're going to reuse the profile page for communities, and we're going to also reuse the tabs, but for communities, they're going to say something different. Like the second tab is going to say members. Pretty cool. Now, let's move forward to the actual tabs by exiting our profile header and moving below it. Right below it, we're going to render a div that's going to have a class name equal to margin top of 9. And then we want to start rendering the tabs. Tabs are going to come from shadcn. So you already know the drill. We can simply say something like npx shadcn UI add latest, add, and then we can say tabs. This is going to immediately install them and allow us to use it. There we go. We can say yes. And we are ready. So now we can render the tabs right here. And within the tabs, we're going to render the tab list. And we can import all of these components coming from shadcn. So here we can say import tabs, as well as tabs content, as well as tabs list, and tabs trigger. And all of that is coming from add / components / UI / tabs. Great. And here we're supposed to have an S, tabs list. There we go. So our tabs is going to have a default value equal to threads. And it's going to have a class name equal to w-full. Now, if we save this, you can see that we already start seeing some kind of a structure appear, but of course we have to provide a data to our tabs. So here we can have a class name equal to tab, and that's just going to expand it a bit and make it look more like a tab. And then we want to loop over the tabs. And those tabs are going to be saved within our constants. So if you go to our constants index.js, here you can see profile tabs and community tabs. So we'll be able to simply loop through them. So open a new dynamic block of code and say profile tabs dot map, where we have each individual tab, and we want to instantly return something known as a tabs trigger for each one of these tabs, like a button opening a tab. Within the tabs trigger, we want to have a self-closing image, which we of course have to import from next image as well. Below the image, we want to have a p tag that's going to render the tab.label. And that label can be hidden on small devices. So we can say class name max-sm hidden. And now we can start adding data to our tabs trigger. First, since we have profile tabs, we have to import them from add / constants. Then we have to provide a key equal to tab.label. We also have to provide a value equal to tab.value and a class name equal to tab. This image is going to have a source equal to tab.icon and an alt tag equal to tab.label, as well as the width is equal to 24, height is equal to 24, and the class name is going to be equal to object contain. Now, if we save this, you can see that we have 3 tabs and we can switch through them. This is looking pretty good. Now, on smaller devices, we won't be able to fit all of these, which is exactly why we're hiding the label and just keeping the icon. Pretty cool stuff, and you can see how powerful shadcn is. Of course, here I told you that you have to provide a value, a key, wrap everything in a tabs trigger or tabs list. But of course, by reading the documentation, you would be able to figure this out on your own as well. Now, with the threads one, we also have to add this number saying how many threads does a user have. So that's going to be right below the p tag, where we can say if tab.label is triple equal to threads with a capital T, then and only then render a p tag that's going to have a class name equal to margin left 1 to divide it from the left side, rounded -sm, bg-light -4, padding x of 2, padding y of 1, not text-tiny-medium. This is going to apply a specific font size, and then text-light-2. And within it, we can simply render what? User info $.threads.length. And if we save this, we can see that we have created 3 different threads. Now, of course, if the number says 3, Heck, we want to see those three below. So let's move outside of the tabs trigger as well as the tabs list and render the profile tabs dot map, where we have each individual tab. And for each one, we want to render a tabs content. This tabs content is going to have a key equal to content dash, and then we can render the tab.label to make it unique. It's going to have a value equal to tab.value, as well as a class name equal to w-full and text-light-1. Within it, we want to render a new component called threads tab. And to it, we can pass the current user ID equal to the user ID, the account ID equal to the user info.id, and then the account type, which is going to be equal to a string of user. And then here we'll be able to figure out if we are the creator of this post or not. If we are on our own profile, looking at our own threads, then there's going to be a delete button right here allowing us to delete the thread. Otherwise, it won't be. So we have to pass this additional info to figure that out. And now let's go into the components and create a new shared component called thread, or rather threads tab.tsx. And there we can create a new const threads tab is equal to an async functional component that is for now going to just return a section that can say threads tab. And of course, we have to do export default threads tab. Going back, we can import it coming from components shared threads tab. And of course, now TypeScript is complaining that we have to pass the right props to it. So going back right here, let's do just that. We're going to accept the current user ID as well as the account ID, and finally the account type. And that's going to be of a type is props. And you already know the drill. Props is going to be an interface. So we can say interface, props, and we can say current user ID is a string, account ID is a string, and account type is a string as well. Finally, inside of here, we'll be able to fetch specific posts that only belong to this specific user or a specific organization or community. And then we can render all of them below. So our next job is to create a function that's going to fetch profile threads. And that is not that hard considering that we have our structure put in place. So if we go to our actions, user actions, and go just below the fetch user, we can create a new one, export async function fetch user posts. This one is going to require a user ID of a type string, and immediately within it, we can open up a new try and catch block and try to connect to the database. Once we do that, we have to find all threads authored by the user with the given user ID. So we can do that by saying const threads is equal to await user.find1, where the ID is equal to user ID, and then we have to call the .populate method on it. We want to populate the path of threads, where the model is equal to thread, which we have to import from above by /models thread.model. And then we want to populate one more time where we have a path of children, a model equal to thread, and an even deeper populate where we have the path is equal to author. So we want to know the author even of a child thread where it's going to be a model of user, and we only want to select the name, the image, and the ID, which we can pass in a string, just like so. Later on, we'll also have to populate the community as well. So I can add a to-do, populate community. There we go, just so we don't forget. Now we're populating it and we can simply return the threads. If we have an error, we can simply throw a new error, failed to fetch posts, and the error is of a type any. And with that, we're done with the fetch user post, which means that we can return here and just call it straight away. So we can say let result is equal to await fetch user posts. And there we can pass in the account ID. Of course, this fetch user post is coming from add/lib/actions/user.actions. And now, if we don't have a result, so if no result, we can simply redirect to /. And this redirect is coming from next navigation. So once we do get all the results, what we can do is render a section with a class name equal to mt9 flex-call and gap-10. This is the div or section inside of which we're going to render our posts. So let's do just that. Let's say result.threads.map, where we have each individual thread. And for each one of these, we want to return, can you guess what? Well, a thread card. Yes, thankfully we made our life easier from the get-go by creating the thread card before. So what we can do now is find where we're calling this thread card. We're already doing it in a couple of places, and we can simply copy its instance. So let's copy this thread card, which is from the thread details page, and we can paste it right here. We'll have to give it a key, an ID, a current user ID, which for now can simply be current user ID, a parent ID, text. Later on, we might need to update the author as well as the community to indicate whether we are the owners of the community and whether we are the authors or somebody else's. But for now, this will do. So let's import the thread card. And we can say that the thread is of a type any just for now. And we can save this. And if we fix this typo right here, hopefully we'll be able to see our 3 posts. There we go. It's looking good, but the profile photo is broken. So as I said, we'll have to update our author. And we can do that by figuring out if the account type is triple equal to user, which in this case it is because we're passing it. If that is the case, then we can have a ternary operator. So we can say if account type is equal to user, then we can return a name, which is result.name. This result is coming right from our database. Image is going to be result.image, and ID is going to be result.id. Else, if this is not the account type user, then we'll have to get the data directly from the thread itself. So we can say else name is thread.author.name, image is thread.author.image, and ID is thread.author.id. We're going to explain this in more detail later on. Now here I have an extra column, so we can remove that, and we should be good. And there we go. Now we can see the name and the profile photo. And if you look at the number of threads, it's going to say 3, but we can only see 2. This is definitely something we can look into later and try to fix it. But what does this mean? Well, it means that we have successfully created a profile photo. Now let's go back to our homepage. And I was about to say, let's try to visit somebody else's profile, but we don't have any. But not to worry, we can easily log out and create a new account. So let's do just that. I'm going to click logout. We can then navigate to sign in. And as you can see, we'll also have to center this form, but we can leave that for later. Now let's simply log in, maybe this time using GitHub. Go through the onboarding. I'm going to give myself a username of a full JavaScript mastery this time, and a name of blue JSM, because we're going to switch the profile photo to the blue logo so we can differentiate the 2 profiles. And I'm going to say blue right here and click submit. This just redirected us to the home page, But I hope you can see something weird happening right here. Even though these two posts were created by the original JSM account, now it says that they were created by Blue JSM, which is definitely not the case. And if we go to our profile, it simply breaks because it should go to profile/ID, but we can fix that later on. For now, let's figure out why these are saying Blue JSM and not the regular one. And to check that, we can go to Components, Cards, and then the thread card, and figure out where we're rendering the author. That's going to be right here, author name, and also we have author image right here. And this author is coming right here as a prop to the thread card. So we have to figure out on our homepage where we're calling the thread card, how are we passing it? So right here, we can see that the current user ID and the author is simply set to author, and that belongs to the author of the post, which is coming from the results, which seems to be good, right? We're fetching all the posts. So why would the author be the one that didn't actually create it? It should be the one that added it to the database. Let's figure that out. If we quickly open up our database deployments and go to our cluster 0, and then our collections and our users, you're going to see something quite weird. There's only one user right there with 3 posts. This means that both my Gmail and my GitHub use the same email account, which is why my accounts were merged into one, which is okay. So now let's go back to our app, log out one more time, and then sign in with an account of a different email. Now this one can be the real JSM. And I can say JavaScript Mastery because the other one is a blue one. And let's do JS Mastery and say the real JSM and click submit. And we can go ahead and fix this navigation link by going to our nav, shared, and then left sidebar. And then here we have our links. There we go, is active. And we just want to ensure that the profile link points to the right route. So here we can say if link.route is triple equal to /profile. In that case, we can modify the link.route to be equal to link.route, but then /user ID. And this user ID, where is it coming from? Well, it's coming from use auth, which is coming from clerk. So right here at the top, we can import right here, use auth. And then we can say const user ID is equal to use auth. There we go. And we can make that equal. Now, if we save this, and if we click profile, it's going to go to profile and then user ID. And now you can see it points to the correct one with 0 threads. Now let's try to create a new thread. And it usually takes some time to navigate to this page, but that's okay. On the deployed version, it's going to be instantaneous. Let's say I'm posting from the original JSM account, just to be sure, and click post. We got redirected. We can reload the page, and there we go. Now we can see our post. Now, if we go to our own profile, we can now see one thread. And if we go to the blue JSM, we can see the blue JSM one. This is great. This makes sense. And now our profiles are working. Of course, we can try to comment on the blue JSM's posts. And there we go. They're disagreeing with themselves. But here we can say something like, no, I agree. And let's click reply just to check the commenting functionality. And there we go. It works. Now on the finished version, on a specific post, there should be some space between the comments. And here we don't have a lot of space. So let's go to our thread details page, which is going to be in the root thread and then page. And then here we are going over our thread cards. And they're labeled as is comment. So now if we go into our thread card, we can use this is comment to add that margin on the top. And that can happen right here. We're rendering the content. And then below, we can give this class name we can make it dynamic first of all, and then say if is comment. In that case, we can also give it a margin bottom of 10. This is going to apply that only to the bottom of the first comment and the second one, so it's going to provide additional space and make it look great. Awesome. So now we have the home page. We can switch between different profiles. We can also leave comments on other people's profiles. Already, this is a pretty hefty social media application. But as you know, we're going to bring it a step further. We are yet to create our profile search as well as our activities, and then finally the communities. So let's start by doing it step by step. Now that we have the profiles, we can search for them. So let's close all of the currently open files. We can collapse the file tree, go to the app, root, and create a new folder called search. Within it, we can create a new page.tsx. There, we can do our usual stuff. I can even use the RAFCE, which is going to quickly spin up a page, which is going to be called page. And we don't need to import React. It is going to be an asynchronous page. And for now, we can return a section that's simply going to have an h1 equal to class name is equal to head-text and margin bottom of 10. And it's going to say search. Now, as soon as we save this, we can now navigate to our search, which does take some time, but as I said, later on, Next.js is going to optimize it for the deployed version, and we can see our search. And while we're here, why don't we just create all of the pages that we're going to have later on? So we can copy this entire page and create a new folder called activity. And within activity, create a new page.tsx. And we can simply paste it right here and switch this to activity. That's going to allow us to be able to switch to the heart icon as well, which is the activity page. And we can also create communities. So let's create a new folder called communities and create a new page.tsx, paste it, and say communities. This is now going to allow us to switch to communities as well, making all of our 6 icons or 6 different paths work flawlessly. Now, this is pretty weird. While I was creating communities, it auto-created a layout, but we don't need it here, so I can delete it. And once I do, it automatically gets created. What is that? It's possible because I created it right here, not in the root, but it should have been in the root. So let's move it to the root folder and then remove the layout. And hopefully that's going to make it work. Yep, this is perfect. And now it suits our original root layout. Great. So as I said, let's start from the top to the bottom, starting with the profile search, and we can move from there. That's going to be in the search page tsx, and we can close the other files. Here, we can do a similar thing we've done in the profile page, which is just check if the user currently exists and if they have properly been onboarded. So we can copy those 4 lines as well as the majority of the imports and paste them right here on top of this page. Here, we won't have params, so for now we can clear this out and we won't be importing any tabs. But we do need general stuff like getting the user and then fetching that user data to check whether they have been onboarded. Now, with that said, we'll have to create an additional function, which is to fetch all the users. So we can write that down, fetch users. And of course, this is another action within our lib actions, user actions. So let's get started with creating the fetch users right here by saying export async function, fetch users. Within it, later on, we're going to pass a lot of things, but for now we can leave it empty. And then finally, we have a try and catch block where we can first try to connect to DB as we usually do. Now for this, we're going to implement the entire pagination functionality similar to what we have done for our posts. So here we have to first calculate the number of users to skip based on the page number and page size. So we can say const skip amount is equal to page number minus 1 times the page size Then we need to create a case-insensitive regular expression for when we're searching the users. So we can say const regex is equal to new regexp, where we pass in the search string and make it lowercase I, which means that it is case insensitive. Now, of course, the page number, this is going to be here the page size, and all of these other things are going to be coming from our params. So right here, let's pass them in one by one. We're going to have a user ID, a search string, which if it doesn't exist can default to an empty string, a page number, which can default to 1, a page size, which can default to something like 20, and a sort by, which can default to something like desk, as in descending. And there we go. Now we're passing all of these things, which is great. And of course, we have to define the types of these things. So we can define them here by saying user ID is a string, search string is optional and it is a string, page number is optional and it is a number, page size is optional and it is a number, and then sort by is going to be a sort order, which is coming from Mongoose, so we can import it right here. If you click it, it's just going to be a type of -1, 1, ascending, descending, or similar. So we always know what we are sorting by. There we go. So now we can proceed with our functionality of fetching and sorting. First, we can create an initial query to get the users. That's going to be const query is equal to an object where we can simply have an ID and we can say $NE as in not equal to user ID. So we want to filter out our current user. Then we need to check if a search string exists. So we can say if search string dot trim is not triple equal to an empty string. In that case, we can proceed with the search and append a query by saying query dot $or is equal to an array where we search for a username that then looks into regex equal to regex we created before, as well as it can search a name of a similar regular expression. So we're searching both by name and by username, because maybe somebody knows you by your name or your nickname. So this or is saying that property or does not exist on type ID not equal to string, and that is this query right here, which means that we have to give this query a type. So we can see this is of a type filter query, which is coming from Mongoose. And we can further define it because it's a filter query for the type of user. And if we fix this now it shouldn't complain anymore because it knows that this query is going to have access to the or object. Great. Now we are doing the fetching. We are preparing for the skipping. We're doing the searching, but now we can also do sorting. So we can define the sort options by saying const sort options is equal to, and then we can say created add, and then we can sort it by sort by. Then we can also do const users query. Finally, we can get them based on all of these search and filtering and querying criteria by saying user.find, pass in the query, and then we can do the dot sort with sort options. We can do a dot skip based on the skip amount, and then dot limit on the page size. Great. Then we can get the total user count by saying const total users count. And we're going to use this to know the total number of pages for the users by saying await user dot count documents, and we pass in the query as well. And this sort by that you're seeing here should be sort by, not sorry by. So I'm glad I got that fixed. Now, once we have the user's query, we can finally execute it by saying const users is equal to await users query dot exec. And now, based on the total number of users, we can know is there a next page by saying const is next is equal to total users count is greater than skip amount plus users dot length, similar to what we've done with the threads. And the total user count should be total users count. There we go. And finally, we can now return all of the users as well as the is next property. If we have an error, you know the drill, we can simply throw a new error saying failed to fetch users and set the errors of a type any. And with that, we're done with the fetch users action. And going back, we can now call that action. So here we can say const result is equal to await fetch users, and we can import that from user actions at the top. Once we get it, we have to pass all of the params to it. We have to pass the user ID equal to user.id. We have to pass a search string, which for now we can leave as an empty string because we're going to implement that later on. The page number for now can be simply 1. And finally, the page size can be something like 25. And it looks like I imported a wrong function. Thank you, TypeScript, for telling me that. I imported fetch user posts instead of the newly created fetch users function. So let's import fetch users coming from add/lib actions user actions. Great. Now, if we save this, we finally have the results, and now we can render them right here to show all of the different profiles that exist on our app. For now, it should be 1 because besides our currently logged in user, there is another one. So what we can do is we can render later on a search bar right here, but we can leave that for later. For now, we just want to render all of them. So we can have a div that's going to have a class name equal to margin top of 14, flex dash col, and gap dash 9. Inside of there, we can say result.users.length is triple equal to 0. If that is the case, then we simply say something like no users. And we can also give it a class name, say no result. This is going to just apply a specific styling to that text. If we do have the users though, we can render a React fragment within which we're going to have a result.users.map where we go over each specific, let's call it a person in this case, and we're going to render a user card, which is a special self-closing component. So now we can go to our components, specifically to cards, and create a new user card.tsx. In there, we can run RAFCE or simply create a basic user card. And now going back, we can import it from components, cards, user card. Great. To that card, we can pass a key equal to the person.id. We can also pass an ID equal to the person.id. Let's pass a name equal to the person.name. We also need to pass a username equal to person.username. The image URL equal to person.image. And we're going to also reuse this card later on for communities. So now we can say person type is equal to just a string of user. Later on, we're going to make it work for communities. Now we have to accept all of these props in the user card. So let's do just that. We can say that we want to get the ID, the name, the username, the image URL, as well as the person type. And that's going to be equal to a type, or rather an interface of props, which we can define right here. So that's going to be interface props, where we have an ID of a type string, name of a type string, username of a type string, image URL of a type string, and a person type of a type string. Great. And we can start rendering that person card. Trust me, it's going to be a breeze. We can wrap everything in an article, the best way to wrap a typical card, and give it a class name equal to user-card. If we save this, we should already be able to see just one card appear somewhere, although it's not really that noticeable. Maybe once we add the profile image, we'll be able to see it. So let's create a div that's going to say class name is equal to user-card_avatar. And within it, we can render a self-closing image tag that's going to have a source equal to img URL. The alt tag is going to be logo. The width is going to be 48. The height is going to be 48 as well. and the class name is going to be rounded-full. And of course, we have to import image coming from next image. Once we do that, hopefully we'll be able to see something on the search. And there we go. We can see the blue JSM logo. Let's also render its name and the username. We can do that below this image, still within the div, by creating a new div with a class name equal to flex-1 text-ellipsis. That's going to be a double L right here. And this is going to ensure that it applies a text overflow of ellipsis, saying that ... if the name is too long. Then we can render an h4 that's going to render a name. And we can give it a class name equal to text-base-semibold, as well as text-light-1. If we save it, the name should be visible. Right below it, we can render a p tag that's going to have a class name equal to text-small-medium, as well as text-gray-1, and it's going to render add and then a dynamic username. Okay, this is looking more like it. And finally, at the bottom, we want to have a button that's going to say view. So this is going to be below these two divs. And this button is going to come from /UI button. And it's going to say view. By default, the button is not going to be anything special, but of course we can style it by giving it a class name equal to user-card_btn. We can also give it an onClick property that's going to be a callback function where we can simply use our router. So we can create a new instance of the router at the top by importing it. So import use router coming from next/router. We can create an instance of it by saying const router is equal to use router. And then here we can use the router by saying router.push, and we want to push to /profile/ and then the ID. Now, if we save this, you can see that now we have to turn this into a client component. So here we can say use client, and it's giving me an error that the next router was not mounted. That's because I made a mistake. The use router is coming from next navigation. So it looks like I had the old next 12 ways of doing it, but next navigation is the right way to do it now. And now we can click view, and it's going to lead us to the finished profile page of the blue JSM. The finished application search looks something like this. We have a card with all of these different users, and here we have just one, which is exactly how it should be, because so far we have created one other account other than our own. So for now, it wouldn't even make a lot of sense to add the search functionality as of yet, because we have no data to search for. But we can come back to this later on. For now, we can move on to the next part, which is implementing the activity page. This is going to be quite interesting. This is like a notifications tab, allowing you to see when somebody else commented on your post. So that's pretty useful. Not always do you build out notifications when developing these social media applications. At least not a lot of people teach you, but today I will. So now we can move to the app. At this point, you should already be aware of our entire file and folder structure. As you can see, once you build it out, it is scalable. You just keep coming back and forth between components, lib actions, models, and then all the way to the pages. So let's go to root, activity, and then page. And this is where we can get started with implementing it. Once again, we're going to have those similar checks that we usually have. So we can go to our search and we can simply copy these first initial few imports and lines. And then we can paste it right here. So once again, this just included the const user is equal to await current user, and then it allows us to check whether the user has onboarded. Of course, we won't be needing many of these imports, so we can remove them. But the one we will need is the import to our new action, which is going to be called get activity. Okay, or get notifications if you prefer. So now we can go back to the user actions. That's going to be within lib actions user actions. And right below fetch users, we can implement our last action of the day, at least the last user action, which is export async function get activity. And the only thing it needs is the user ID of a type string. There we can try to connect to the DB. If we succeed, great. If not, no worries. We can simply throw a new error that's going to look like this. Failed to fetch activity, and then we can render the error.message. Now, if we do manage to get it, that's great. We can first find all threads created by the user. And we can do that by saying const user threads is equal to await thread.find, where the author is the user ID. Once we find that, we want to collect all the child thread IDs, which are the actual replies or comments from the children field. Pretty cool stuff, right? We're going deeper and deeper, and we want to get all of the comment IDs. We can do that by saying const child thread IDs is equal to user threads that we just fetched dot reduce. Okay, so we're using a native JavaScript reduce function. We have the accumulator as well as the user thread, which is the object we're looping over. And then we want to return the accumulator, and we want to concat user thread dot children. I know this is a bit more complex, but hey, whenever you have a code that looks like this, let's ask ChatGPT to explain it. This is a great tip that I can give you. Don't be afraid of AI. Just let it be your friend. So I'm going to say explain this function. And let's paste it right here. Okay, let's see. It utilizes array reduce to accumulate the child thread IDs from an array of user threads. Let's break it down step by step. User threads is an array containing multiple objects, each representing a user thread. Okay, that's pretty simple. Now, each thread object is expected to have a property called children. Yes, which are the comments. First, we declare a new variable where we want to store all comment IDs. Then we use the array reduce method on that user threads that takes a callback function as its first argument. The callback function will be executed once for each element in the user threads to accumulate the child thread IDs. So think of it as a map or as a for each. It's going to go over all of the elements, all of the threads, and it's going to dive into their children. Now the question is, what does it want to do with those children? Well, we're going to accumulate it. So we're going to keep track of all the children elements that we pass to it, and it's going to hold the current result. And then it's going to always get the new user thread every new iteration. Finally, once everything gets processed, we're going to return, meaning concat, a new array by merging the elements of the accumulator with the element of the last user thread, that children array. So one more time, the reduce method will iterate over each element in the user threads array, and at each step, it will concatenate the child thread IDs of the current user thread object to the accumulated result. Oof, this was a tough one, right? But in summary, this function takes an array of user threads, which are just nothing more than the threads that that user has posted, right? Each having a children property, which is an array of comments, that holds an array of child thread IDs, comments, right? It uses array reduce to concatenate all the child thread IDs from each user thread into a single array, which is then stored in child thread IDs. As a matter of fact, let me ask ChatGPT if it can give me an example. Give me an example of the data. And hopefully it will. Let's see. There we go. So we have user threads with the ID and children. And then we go over it, and then it's going to just output the children. But now we have to make it make sense, right? The children are an array of comments. make the children array of random tweet comments. Okay, didn't understand the example. Doesn't matter. I'm gonna take it here and we're gonna make it make sense, right? So we have something like this, and these are all the different strings of different comments that we have. Something saying like, this is great. The other one is going to say, this is bad. And this is going to say, this is terrible. This is going to say, okay. This is going to say bad. And this is all that we need. Now we're going to go through each one of these, take the current element, right? Store it in a new array, which is this one, go through the next one, take additional elements and add it to that array. Okay. So we're essentially just collecting all the comments. That is it. I know it might be a bit complicated, but take your time, don't let your brain explode, and let's go through this together. The more practice you take, the better you will become. Finally, we want to get access to all of the replies, excluding the ones created by the same user. So we can say const replies is equal to await thread.find, where the underscore ID of the thread is in child thread IDs. And then the author is not the current user ID. So we can exclude the threads created by the same user that is searching for this. And then we can call the .populate, which we use many times so far, with a path of author as well as a model of user. And which fields do we want to get? Well, we can select the name, image, and the underscore ID, just like so. And this is going to give us back our replies, which we can simply return, just like so. Now, once again, I know this is a more complicated function, but one more time, let's give ChatGPT to explain it. Explain this in simple terms. And let's see if it's going to do it. Is AI going to change the world or not? Okay, this is way too complicated of an explanation. Explain it to me like I'm 5. Okay, let's see if this is going to work. And let's also say shorter. This function helps someone find all the comments they received on their post from others on a computer. It gathers all the comments from different places, puts them together, and shows them to the person. If there's a problem, it tells the person something is wrong. It's referring to this error here. So this is pretty good. Gets all the comments, shows you that you have new replies. That's it. Now we can go back to the activity and we can actually call this by saying const activity is equal to await get activity. And we can import it from lib actions user actions. And we need to pass the user info ._ID to it. Once we have it, we can loop over all of those comments. How do we do that? Well, we can create a new section that's going to have a class name equal to margin top of 10, flex -col, gap-5. And there we can say activity.length is greater than 0. So if we actually do have any activity, then render an empty React fragment, inside of which we can say activity.map, where we get each individual activity, and we can display a new link pointing to that comment right there. Now, of course, if we don't have any comments, we can simply return a p tag that's going to say no activity yet. Now, this link is coming from next/link. It needs a key, considering we're mapping over it. So we can say activity._ID is the key. The href is actually going to point to the thread details page. So it can be /thread/activity.parent_ID. And inside of there, we can render an article that's going to have a class name equal to activity-card. And there we can render an image of the person that posted that comment. Of course, we have to import image coming from next/image. We have to give it a source equal to activity.author.image. Alt is going to be profile picture. Width is going to be about 20. Height of about 20 as well. And the class name, as usual with profile photos, rounded-full and object-cover. Now, if we save this, we'll see if we have any photos as of yet. It looks like we still have a problem with act.concat being not a function. Let's see. And that's because I forgot to pass a default value to the concat function. So we need to provide, like in the useEffect hook, also a default value here. This is not a dependency array like usual, but rather this is the default accumulator that we have to add to the reduce function. If we add it, the issue gets fixed. And right here, we can see no activity yet. So let's go ahead and fix that by giving it a class name of no text base regular, as well as text-light-3. If we do it, we should be able to see no activity yet. Why is there no activity? Well, that's because Blue JSM didn't yet comment on any of our posts. So what we can do is we can comment on his, and then once we go into his activity, we'll be able to see that. So let's just add a comment here on Next.js 13 is great. And let's say something like, no, I have to disagree, and click a reply. There we go. It automatically appears. And that allows us now to log out and log in with GitHub, which is going to get me into the Blue JSM. And let's fix the centering of this modal while we're here by going to auth layout.tsx. And let's wrap the children within a div. So that's going to be a div that's going to have a class name, which is going to be equal to w-full, flex, justify-center, items-center, and then min-h-screen. And we can put the children within it. So if we do this and save it, you can see that it is nicely positioned in the center of the screen. So now let's log in with JSM Blue in my case, or something else in your case, some different account on which you left the comments on. There we go. And let's go to activity, which is here. And you can see that we have two different cards, although it's hard to see what they're about right now. So let's add a notification to let the user know what is actually happening. So below this image, we can add a p tag saying that's going to have a span element within it, and that's going to say activity.author.name. And then below that span, we can say replied to your thread. And here we can add an extra empty space. Now, if we save this, it's going to be hard to notice it because it's all dark. But if we give this p tag a class name of not text-small-regular and text-light-1, and the span a class name of margin right or MR1 and text-primary-500, this should look great. As you can see, we now see that JavaScript mastery reply to your thread here as well. So now if we click it, it's actually going to bring us to the thread where we can see JavaScript mastery's comment. This is great. We can also go back and try the second one. And there we go. This is the original one that we left not that long ago. So as you can see, our app is starting to make so much more sense. We can go to the homepage to see all of the posts. We can search for different users, for example, seeing JavaScript mastery right here, and we can look at their profile and see all of their threads, as well as check out the activity. And I know this is pretty slow so far, switching between different pages, but as I said, in the finished website, it's going to be instantaneous. Great. So now the activity page is done as well. And with that, almost all of our pages are done besides the community. So let me show you how the community is going to look like on the finished website. we're going to have a lot of different communities that admins can give you access to. And once you're a member of a community, you can read all of the community's threads, which different users can post within that community. And each post is going to get this tag saying that it was posted within the community. And you'll also be able to see the members of a community. So now we're diving into much harder stuff. Once again, this is not something that you usually see in YouTube tutorials. Heck, not even in courses. So I hope you're excited. This is going to be a big feature, but I hope, as you can see, we already have the infrastructure for it built. The community page is actually going to be a reused profile page. We already have the profile header, as well as the tabs. And then here we'll be reusing the actual thread cards. But that's not going to make it any simpler. There's still a lot of logic that we have to work through together to make this functionality happen. So let's close all of the currently open files and let's go to pages and then communities page.tsx and let's get started. But if you think about it, this would be a wrong place to start with communities. It would be as if we were starting with a homepage when we didn't yet have a create thread page. We first need to be able to create a community to then be able to view it right here in the community's dashboard. So let me show you how we're going to do that. And to make that happen, we're going to utilize a really important concept, and that is the concept of webhooks. A webhook is an event that's going to happen once something gets triggered, and it's going to send a request to process something else at the same time. It's going to make more sense once we actually implement it. But here's the key point of why we have to implement webhooks. We can create an organization right here through Clerk by clicking Create Organization. And it's immediately going to open up a great interface where we can simply upload a profile photo, enter the organization name, a Slack URL, and be good to go. But the question is, how is this data from Clerk going to get into our application instantly? How are we going to append additional posts once they are made as part of an organization? To do that, we have to have webhooks waiting and listening for the events from Clerk so we can then make additional actions and modify our database accordingly. So let's get started by creating those webhook listeners. And our webhook is going to be in form of an API route. So right here within the app, we can create a new API folder, or rather we already have it, but within it, we can create a new folder called webhook. And inside of here, we can create a new folder called clerk. And then within clerk, we can create a new route.ts, and we can get started with creating our webhook. If you visit Clerk's docs, it's also going to talk a bit about webhooks. It says that they allow you to receive event notification with Clerk webhooks. So if you need to keep your local store in sync with up-to-date user info, or you want to send a welcome email, you'll need to set up a webhook. So Clerk can tell you about events that happen on your instance. For information on how to set up webhooks in your instance or how to architecture your application, you can check out our sync data to your backend guide, which is exactly what we are going to do. For the majority of use cases, data syncing is not needed at all, and this guide can be skipped, such as for all the things that we've used so far, logging in, getting the user info, and so much more. But this application is more advanced, and we want to show you how we can create those communities and sync their data. So it is a common setup for applications that involves a frontend and some sort of a backend storage system. Since authentication and user management happen on Clerk's side, the data will eventually need to reach the application's backend. The recommended way to sync data between Clerk and your application is via webhooks. In this guide, you'll learn how to enable webhooks and how to set up your backend so that it is updated every time an event happens on your Clerk instance. First, we're going to go to our Clerk dashboard, and you can get there by going to dashboard.clerk.com and opening your project. Great, we even saw that we now have live users, which we can see right here. Then we can go to webhooks, and later on, we'll be able to add an endpoint, which is this exact route we'll be working on right now. This can be an ngrok server, but in this case, it's going to be the deployed endpoint of our current application. Then you'll be able to filter which events you want to listen, and then sync the data to your Clerk database. This is more or less it. I don't want you to read through these docs because I'm going to show you how to do all of that today. And these are only some of the events that Clerk supports. You can track when an organization is created, deleted, updated, or when the invitations have been accepted, created, revoked, and even additional details about memberships. We're going to get events in this format, and they even support TypeScript, so you know exactly what your webhook event looks like. And this is also important, we'll be verifying our requests. We're going to use the Swix package to power the webhooks, so you can even verify the webhooks to ensure that they are valid. And this is needed because usually the app will be susceptible to a number of attacks. So I found this great part of the Clerk's documentation where they show us exactly how to create a webhook. Clerk, app, router, webhooks. And this is coming directly from James Perkins. So what I've done is taken the raw format of this entire file and then modified it slightly to work for our specific events. The link to this route.ts is going to be in the description down below within a GitHub gist file. So simply open it, copy it, and then paste it right here. We're going to go through every single little detail together, so soon enough, everything is going to start to make sense. So in here, I even included a couple of resources. Here is the sync data to your backend URL from the Clerk docs, and then even a resource of why we need to verify webhooks. And here are the imports for the community actions file, which we don't yet have, which is going to be incredibly similar to user. It's just not going to be creating a user or deleting a user, but rather creating a community and deleting a community. So let's create this new community.actions file by going all the way down to lib, actions, and then create a new community.actions.ts. And this is going to be another file that you'll be able to find within your GitHub gist down below. So you can simply copy and paste it right here. As I said, the majority of the functions are going to be similar. We're making connections to our database and then finding and or updating or deleting specific instances. But no worries, while going through these different functions, we're going to explain how each and every one of them works. For now, we can just collapse them so it's easier to see what we're working with. And of course, these require additional models. We already have the model for the user and the thread, but now we can create a model for the community. And here you'll have to slightly fix the import by saying it's coming from /models and then / community, thread, and user. Now, how is our community schema going to look like? Well, believe it or not, it's going to be incredibly similar to our user. So let's simply say community.model.ts. And let's copy everything we have in our user and paste it right here within the community. We can rename this to community schema. The ID is going to be the same. The username is going to be the same. Name, same. Image, same. Bio, same. But this time we're going to have an additional property of created by. And this is going to be a reference of a type mongoose.schema.types.objectID to the user. A community can also have the threads, just like a user can. And then instead of onboarded and communities, we're going to have access to the members, which is going to be an array of type is equal to mongoose.schema.types.objectID with a reference to user. So multiple users can belong as members of a specific community. Finally, we can say const community is equal to mongoose.models.community or mongoose.model community and community schema. And we have a model for the community, so the actions should no longer complain. Great. Now we can go back to the webhook file that we were explaining not that long ago. We have the actions to add member to community, create community, delete, remove, and update. We have different event types, events, and then we have a post route. Here we have the heads for the Swix verification of our webhooks. Here we're activating the webhook in our clerk dashboard, and we need to add a next clerk webhook secret. But we can only do this after we add the endpoint. So we'll add this later on to our env. For now, we can simply add it there as a reminder that something needs to be there. So let's put it here next to clerk at the top, next clerk webhook secret, and we're going to fill it in later on. And now this is where the most important part happens. Here we have different if statements. So we're saying if event type is organization.created, then we can collapse that. And we have listen organization membership. So this is if a member invites and accepts creation. Then we have if a member is deleted, if organization is updated, and if an organization is deleted. So this is 5 events in total. And here's the thing. What we do is we listen for this event from clerk. So once we actually go here and do something, then we get all of this information from my webhook. And then here's the kicker. We call our own action, such as create community and pass in all the details, which then does everything we are used to so far. In this case, connects to the database, finds the user, and then creates a new community and attaches it to it. So hopefully this makes sense. We've gone through this process many times, and I didn't want you to write all of this code by hand again. But if you want to, you're more than welcome to just figure out what all of these functions do and ensure if it makes sense. If you have any questions regarding these community functions, just let me know in the comments down below or send me an email and we're going to gladly reply. We'll try to make these videos as engaging and as educational as possible. So I hope that this introduction of webhooks, no matter how hard it can be, still opened eyes for you of how these more complex applications are being done. There's different ways in which we have to pass the data, and we're doing that right now by exposing our webhook. But we're not done just yet. We have to do just that. We have to expose this route and add it as an endpoint right here within Clerk's dashboard. And to be able to do that, we have to deploy our application. So let's go back to the app and just ensure that everything we have so far is working, which it is. And now we can deploy it. We're not deploying it and saying that we're finished. We're just deploying it to be able to expose this API route that we'll then be able to add as the endpoint. So let me show you how do we do that. First, we have to create a new repo for our app. And of course, we can do that by going to github.com/new. There, you'll be able to choose your repo name, for example, threads app. We can make it public and we can click create repository. We can use the second terminal to deploy our application by running git add dot git commit -m first commit. And then we have to say git branch -m main, git remote add origin right here, and finally git push u origin main. This is going to push all of the code from our main branch locally to our repository. And there we go. In just seconds, it is here. If it's here, it means that Vercel could also see it. And through Vercel, we're going to deploy our current application. So let's click Start Deploying. And let's continue with GitHub. I'm going to switch to my organization account. And I'm going to click Import the Threads app. It should appear right here. If it doesn't for you, just search the name of the app that you chose for your repository and click Import. Here, we can go to Environment Variables, and we can copy all of the variables we have and simply paste them here. It's going to add all of them there. And we can click Deploy. If we don't have a lot of errors, this is now going to deploy our app to the internet so that everyone will be able to use it. But of course, don't share the link just yet. We still have many modifications to make before it is fully complete. Now, in this case, we've got an error, which is totally okay. We've pushed a lot of code, so it's normal that everything doesn't go right on the first try. So let's try to read the error message and figure out what is breaking. This one doesn't really give us a lot of information, so let's proceed. And then down here we see a fail to compile. Property ID does not exist on type empty object. So this right here is a type error, which means that it's coming from TypeScript. That's not really a problem at this point. For now, we just want to ensure that the app is deployed so that we can add this webhook as an endpoint to Clerk. So what we can do is go to next.config.js, and right at the top, we can add a new TypeScript property, which is an object. That's going to have ignore build errors set to true. And we can just push this to GitHub by saying git add dot git commit dash m. We can say ignore TS errors and then git push. If I'm not mistaken, this should automatically retry our deployment and we're going to see if it's going to succeed. So I'm going to go to JS Mastery Pro, and here we have all of our deployments. A lot of the repos here are not going to be known to you right off the bat because they're not YouTube projects. As you can see, cohort 5, cohort 3, and a lot of different teams are here creating phenomenal applications within the JSM Masterclass experience. There, the members get first-hand experience building projects just like the one you're building today, but in a real-life setting, with other teammates and with the mentors such as myself guiding you all the way through. With that said, we can see that our Threads app now has been successfully deployed. It is ready, and we can check it out by clicking Visit. And there we go. I hope now you trust me when I told you that it's going to be super quick once it's deployed. First, we need to log in. So let's go ahead and log in with Google. I logged in one of my accounts, and there we go. We can immediately switch from all of the pages, and it just feels so quick. This is phenomenal. Next.js truly is the framework of the future if you use it in the right way. So with that said, our app is live, but where is our endpoint? Well, it's going to be under App, API, Webhook, Clerk, and then route.ts. So let's copy our URL, go to the dashboard in Clerk, and click Add Endpoint. Paste the current URL that you copied, and then let's navigate. It's going to be within API, Webhook, Clerk, and that is it. You can even add a description, and here in the filter events section, we want to tick the events we want to listen to. So in this case, we want to know when the organization was deleted or updated, as well as when the organization invitation has been accepted, created, or revoked, and when organization membership was created, deleted, or updated as well. This is going to be more than enough for now. And now you can click Create. This is now going to expose a signing secret, which is right here. So you can view it, and then you can copy it. We'll have to add it to two places. The first place is our .env.local, and the second place is going to be our deployed version of the application. So let's go back to Vercel to where we started, which is right here, going to Settings, Environment Variables, and then we want to modify the next Clerk webhook secret by going to Edit and then pasting the secret right here and clicking Save. And we also want to rerun our deployment just to ensure that the changes have taken effect. So let's click Redeploy and click Redeploy here as well. Great. So now our webhook is connected and it's actually tracking these requests, which means that once we fire an event by, for example, creating an organization right here, our webhook should read it. Once it reads it, it should tell our actions, and our actions are then going to tell our database, which is going to make our clerk side as well as their backend side completely synced. That is great. So let's go ahead and close the deployed version of the application for now, just so we don't make a mistake of making changes here and then wondering why they're not being applied to our website in the browser. We can close this as well, but we will keep this open because here we can monitor the requests we're making. So let's go to our localhost 3000, reload the page just to ensure that we are live. And we're not, so we have to rerun our application right here. Yeah, these are some things that you're going to learn as you go. The website is not always going to be as it seems. It seemed online, but I just wanted to make a check and ensure that it truly is online before we proceed. That comes with experience, right? So as you build these applications and as you're listening to me going through these problems, you're going to learn how to become a better developer yourself. And in these videos, I can only go through a limited amount of stuff because who's going to watch an 8-hour-long video? But thankfully, with our courses, we can go into much more depth. So if you haven't already, definitely stay excited for the next 13 course that's coming soon. With that said, now we're live and we can go to create organization and we can give it a shot. I went online a bit and found a great photo for a new organization. It's a bird. It's going to be a birds lovers community. So let's upload a new image and then drag and drop it here. How seamless it is using Clerk. And let's call it just that, bird lovers. And let's create the organization. In here, you can automatically enter email addresses of people that you want to invite. So that's going to be, maybe in this case, the second account we used to create the organization. So javascriptmastery00@gmail.com. And you can enter more if you want to and make it a member or an admin. A member can create posts but cannot invite other people, and an admin can also invite other people. With a free plan of Clerk, you can invite up to 3 members per community. And with other plans, you can of course invite as much as you want. So let's for now invite just this user and click Send Invitations. Invitations have been sent and we can finish. This is pretty crazy that once I published this repo online, or rather once I published this to GitHub, some people already found the link and started adding new threads to it. So for a lucky few that are following me on GitHub, you'll be able to add a post while I'm recording this, which is pretty cool. So let's see. This user, for example, has created a profile and has simply one post that says bio. Pretty cool. But more importantly, on top right, you can see Bird Lovers admin, and you can even manage your organization by inviting other people and seeing the statuses of these people, as well as change settings of an organization. Pretty cool stuff. Now, what's going to happen if we go to create thread? Are we creating it as ourselves or are we creating it as the organization? Well, let's give it a shot. Let's post a thread. Here, we can say something like Clerk is great and post. On localhost, we still have to reload the page. And there we go. It was still posted by BlueJSM, which means that it's not yet reading that we're a part of a community. So what we can do is close all of the currently open files and go to app, root, create thread, and here navigate to the post thread component. And within here, we can read the organization. So first, we can import use organization coming from add clerk /next.js. Then we can use that organization as a hook by saying const organization is equal to use organization. And then on submit right here, we can check if there is no organization. In that case, we can simply do what we have been doing so far, which is creating a thread. But if we do have an organization, so else, we can do the same thing, but now we can pass additional values. Instead of null, community ID is now going to be organization.id. And everything else is going to stay the same. And now that I look at this code, it could have been simplified if we go back and just say if organization, then we can return organization ID, else we can return null. Silly me, I should have noticed this right off the bat. But with that said, we can now create a new thread, and hopefully now it's going to read that organization.id. But then on our actual thread card, how do we know if it is an organization? Did we implement that logic to be able to see that yet or not? Well, let's find out. Let's go to cards and let's go to the thread card. Here, we're nowhere mentioning the organization. So let's add the part that's going to say this. It should say the time, date, as well as the name of the community. So let's add it right here. That's going to be below comments. So right here. We can exit this block of code and then go 1, 2, 3 divs down. Here, later on, we're going to add the functionality to delete a thread. So we can say delete thread. And alongside that, we're going to also add this cool thing about showing the number of replies with their logos. So we can also duplicate this and say show comment logos. But for now, we're more interested in the community aspect of things. So below all of this, we can check if we're not currently working on a comment. And if we are within a community, then we want to show the following thing. That's going to be a link that's going to have an href going to /communities/community.id. This doesn't exist yet, but we're going to create that page soon. And we can give it a class name equal to margin top of 5, flex, items-center. But what matters more for now is to be able to see that this is indeed created by our community. So inside of here, we can create a class name equal to text-subtle-medium and text-gray-1. And first, within here, we want to format the date. So we can call the format date string coming from @/lib/utils, and we can pass in the created @. And then here we can render the community. We can add a dash and then say community.name and then community. And we can also render the image of that community by rendering a self-closing image tag with a source equal to community.image, an alt tag equal to community.name, a width of 14, as well as a height of 14, and a class name equal to margin left 1, rounded-full, and object-cover. If we now save this, you won't be able to see anything because none of these posts were parts of communities. But if we try to create a new one right now, for example, am I a part of a community, and click post, we can reload the page, and there still is nothing. So we can simply console log the community aspect and see whether we have something there. Of course, this community has to be passed into the thread card. So right now, it seems like we have it, but just to be sure, let's check where are we calling this thread card. And we're calling it, I believe, from the home page. So that's going to be root and then page. And here it is. And we're passing the community saying post that community. So indeed, it should be there. Going back to our thread card, let's try to console log the community and let's try to make sure that it is a bit more visible by doing something like this, community. If we save this and open up a terminal, we should be able to see something right here because I believe this is server-side rendered, although nothing seems to be appearing. The thread card itself, yep, it is server-side rendered. There is nothing else there. So we should be able to see at least some kind of a console log. In the browser, if we look at it, it's not going to be there. But in here, maybe I should make my terminal a bit bigger so that I can actually see it. But I cannot seem to see it because I didn't wrap it in curly braces. So this was actually being rendered on the screen instead of just showing there. So now if we save this, we can see that the community indeed is null for all of these different posts. So when creating a thread, we have to console log and figure out if we are a part of a community already. So here we're checking for the organization, and if the organization ID exists, we're passing it as the organization ID. So let's do another console log right here and check for organization ID. So we can say org ID, or as a matter of fact, we can console log the entire organization just like so we can see what is in there. And now we'll have to submit another post. So let's say test and post. And it seems like we got some kind of a warning. Only plain objects can be passed to client components from server components, which isn't really all that useful. And this org ID is actually on the client side because it is a form element. So it should appear right here. And it seems like we do have an organization. And the ID is indeed here. Okay, that means that our currently logged in user is a part of the organization. So if we check for that organization and pass an organization.id to create thread, we are creating it, but are we fetching it here? We are not. We're always setting the community as null. We let this be intentionally because before we didn't have access to communities, but now we can actually modify our create thread action to actually utilize the concept of communities by simply getting that community ID and then passing it right here. And with the introduction of community, some other things have changed as well in the thread.actions.ts. So in the description down below, you'll be able to find the updated actions file for threads, which you can simply copy and paste right here. You're going to notice that it's going to keep everything as it was for the create thread, but it's going to add this part right here to first of all find the community, and then later on to also update the community model to know that it has a new thread within it. And then for user actions, I believe not a lot will be changed because this actions file is mostly relating to the threads itself and the possibility of creating threads. But just to be sure, in that same GitHub gist, there's also going to be the updated user.actions.ts, which you can simply copy and paste right here. That way, we're ensuring that we're all on the same page and that you can proceed with the development of our app. Now, immediately, we're going to have some errors with our imports. As before, we can update this to come from /models / and then community, thread, and user. And we can do the same thing right here at the top. It's going to come from /models and then user, thread, and community. And then within here, we're now properly passing the community, which should be read by our thread card. So let's create one final post now that our backend is working as well. Let's say birds are great, because now we truly are a part of the bird lovers community. If we reload the page, you can see birds are great, and we have this great bird lovers community part, but it's not at the bottom of the thread as it should be. So there's some spacing issue happening with our thread card that we can fix right away. I believe that we can remove this console log and we can move this right one div below. That way it's going to appear below here as well. This is great. So now we can see that BlueJSM posted a thread at 7 p.m. my time, but it is a part of this bird lovers community. And I can notice that we're missing a space right here before the dash. So we can add an additional space just like so. There we go. If we save it, it's looking great. Now, of course, we want to go to that community page and see if some other people have posted on there as well. But for now, we don't have a page for the community details. So let's create it. We can go to app, root communities, and then create a new folder with square brackets of ID, and within it, a new page.tsx. This page is going to be incredibly similar to our profile page. So let's go to profile, ID, page.tsx, and let's copy this entire thing and paste it over here. Now we can make some modifications to it and make it work for our community as well. So what are the changes that we have to make? Well, let's explore them together. Let's look into the imports first. We are going to need the image from next image, as well as the current user. Those are the things that we always use. Next, instead of our profile tabs, which are right here, threads, replies, and tagged, we are going to get our community tabs. So we can bring this up and then say community tabs. There we go. We are going to reuse the profile header as well as the threads tab and all of the components from chat.cn. But in this case, we won't have to fetch the user or we won't have to redirect. So we can remove those two. Inside of here, we're just wondering about our currently logged in user. And then we want to get all of the community details, which we can do by saying const community details is equal to await fetch community details. And then we pass the params.id, which is the ID of that community. This function is coming from lib actions community actions. And once we have the community details, we simply want to pass them to the profile header because it can be the header of a community as well. So we can simply pass all of them here instead of user info. And most importantly, we're going to change the type of the profile header to community. So you can see the profile header is going to complain. So let's get into it and let's modify it so it also accepts the type, which is going to be sometimes there. So there's a question mark, and it can be of a type of string user or string community. And now we're accepting that type right here. Later on, we'll be able to change our profile header depending on that. But for now, let's go back to our page and let's worry about our profile tabs. These are going to become community tabs. Of course, the second one within the community tabs is going to be members, really important part of every community. Now within it, we're not gonna have user info.threads.length, but rather community details.threads. And then a bit below here, we don't have to loop through the content anymore. We can just manually render 3 different pieces of tabs content, which is going to look like this. The first tabs content is going to be threads tab, where we're gonna pass in the community details, ._ID, and we're gonna say community. This tab's content is going to have a value equal to threads, which is going to be simply a string. And we no longer need a key. It's simply going to have a class name of w-full text-light-1. We can duplicate this 2 times. And we want to modify the second one because the second one is going to contain our members. And the third one is going to contain requests. So for the members, what we're going to do here is pretty cool. We can remove the threads tab and then render a new section. This section is going to have a class name equal to margin top of 9, flex, flex-col, and gap-10. Within there, we can render community details (members), and then we can map over those members. Each individual member can be of a type any for now, and we can return a user card because we have already created it. So we can simply import it from components cards user card, and to it, we can pass a key equal to member.id. We can pass the ID equal to member.id. Let's also pass a name equal to member.name, username equal to member.username, img URL equal to member.image, and a person type, which is going to be user. So this right here is a user and not a community. So now if we save this, I don't think we're going to have any errors, which means that now we can go to the community details page, which we can get to by clicking our bird lovers community right here. And once we click here, we seem to be redirected back to the home page, and we can see some new friendly faces here. But why is that? Well, if you go into the Threads tab, you can see that here we have a redirect if we don't have the result. And why wouldn't we have a result? Well, because right now we're fetching user posts, and this is not a user. We're now working with an organization. So what we have to do is we have to add a check. Rather, we have to say let result at the top is of a type any. And then what we can do is say if account type is triple equal to community, in that case, we can do a result, or rather say result is equal to await fetch community posts right here, which we can import from community actions. Else we can use that old fetch user posts that we had before. So we can say fetch user posts. There we go. And in both cases, we pass the account ID, but here the account type is community, so it's gonna know to fetch community posts. So now if we go back and if we click bird lovers community, and for some reason the app broke on me, which happens from time to time, but we have to stop it from running and then rerun it one more time. And then we can test it out and hopefully it will work. And now we are on the community page where we can see the threads as well as the members. This is great. Now, of course, if you want to create a thread as yourself, you can still easily do that. The only thing you have to do is you have to switch from bird lovers to your personal workspace, and then the thread is going to be created as just yourself. Now that we can visit a community profile page, it would make sense to be able to view all communities within our communities tab on the left. So let's go into it and let's show what communities are available. Of course, we can close all of the currently open files and then only open the communities, but not the ID page, rather just the regular page, where right now it simply says communities. If you think about it, this page is going to be really similar to our search page, where we can search for different profiles within the Threads application. And oh my God, how many of you have already created different profiles, and I haven't even advertised this anywhere. I just published the repo online. So now we can create a similar thing for communities, but with a bit of a different design. It's going to look something like this on the finished side, where we have different cards for different communities. And of course, the search bar is going to be there as well. But I don't want you to simply follow along with everything I'm doing. At the end of this whole segment, once we add a few more features, you'll have to do a couple of things on your own. So some pretty cool stuff is coming your way. But for now, let's focus on implementing this look right here. And we can do that by copying what we right now have on our search page, as they are similar. So let's copy it and paste it within the communities. Now inside of here, as you can see, we have a lot of imports, and this is what we can see. But now we're going to try to make it work with the communities. So inside of here, instead of fetching users, we'll want to fetch our communities, which is another action that we have. And it's going to come from community actions. We have to be careful whether this is accepting an object or if it's just accepting different params in a row. Here we can see that it's accepting an object, and we don't have a user ID. So we just have a search string. So we can delete the user ID. And here we can say fetch communities. Now immediately it won't be able to render the users, which makes sense, right? So instead of result.users, all of this is going to be switched to communities. And here we can render an individual community within the dot map. Community. There we go. Now, in this case, we won't be rendering the user card. Rather, we'll be rendering a new card called a community card. So let's go to our components, cards, and let's create a community card right here by saying community card.tsx. And we've already created a lot of cards together in this video. So this one is going to be in the GitHub gist down below, where you'll be able to simply copy it and paste it here. It's going to be incredibly similar to the profile one. It's just going to render the community username, name, image, and more. And then we'll be able to call it right here by importing it from components, cards, community card. And then we can reference all of this as community instead of person. We can also pass the bio equal to community.bio, as well as members is equal to community.members. And we don't need the person type. Now, if we save this, we are fetching the communities, we are rendering them, and indeed we can see our first community. So as you can see, the search page wasn't that different from our communities search page. And now if you click view, it's actually going to redirect us to the community view. And there we go. Now let's also try to create another community by creating a new clerk organization. I'm going to upload an image. And in this case, it can be a community of dog lovers. So we can say dog lovers. And we can create an organization. And we can invite a different account. This time, I'm going to invite JSM Masterclass Experience at gmail.com and give them the admin permissions and send the invitation. Great. Now, if we go to communities, you can see that we have two communities right here, which is looking great. And hopefully I have received the invitation on my email. And indeed I have. We have the invitation from Threads to join Dog Lovers Organization. So let's accept it. This redirected us to the local host, but now we can log out, redirect to sign in, and then I can try logging in with that new email that was invited. And you can see we are in. But now we unfortunately don't see that we have been invited to an organization. That's a bit weird. Let's try to accept the invite one more time. And there we go. Now that we were in, we can accept that invite and we can see the dog lovers community. And we can also go to our profile. And now after reloading the page, it redirected me to the onboarding. I'm guessing this should have happened before, but hey, it's here now once I visited the profile page. Something like this should happen for you as well. I'm going to choose a profile photo, and I'm going to choose one of our old JSM Pro logos with a different color here. I can say JSM Masterclass and say this is my bio, and I can click submit. In this case, we get an error saying that username.toLowercase is not a function. So it looks like it's not picking up the username from here. Let's try to modify it slightly by removing the underscore and then clicking submit. And it still doesn't want to proceed. So let's get back to our onboarding and let's figure out if we have properly passed all the data. And we're back at the part that we should have done at the start. I completely forgot about this. Remember how I told you that we have to connect the data coming from Clerk with the data coming from our own database. And this was supposed to be it. So now here, you know how to fetch the user from the database, right? Well, we can say const user info is equal to await fetch user, and we can pass the user ID. Then we can check if user info !onboarded, then we can redirect to the home page, just like so. And of course, this is supposed to say onboarded. And we can import the fetch user from user actions, as well as redirect coming from next navigation. and the user itself. And we have to ensure if the user exists just to deal with the TypeScript errors or warnings. So we can say if no user, return null. And now we get this user info and we're pairing it to the user data, which is now complete, which we're then passing to the account profile. We should have done this a long time ago, but I completely forgot it, but we got it now. Hopefully you didn't create any new users after this, because then you would have experienced an error. If you experienced that error before, just let me know down in the comments and I'll try to add it somewhere so that other people don't experience it as well. With that said, we can now try to submit this and we again get an error saying username.toLowerCase is not a function, which makes me seem that the username is not being passed properly. So we're checking if userinfo.username exists, then pass that. Otherwise, simply pass the user that username. Let's simply console log it. So we're going to console log the user info (username) as well as user (username). And then let's see what is there. This should reach us right here. And if all of these are empty strings, then we might not actually be able to see it. So I'm going to divide it into two different console logs. And I'm going to add a message before, say something like user info, as well as simply user. And now if we save this, once we visit the onboarding page, we can reload and then we should get something here. So yeah, you can see that user info is going to be undefined, but the user will be there. And this is coming from clerk. So here we're checking if user info (username) and we're passing it. But what we should have done is in all of these cases, we should have checked if user info exists. If it does, then pass the user info.username, else pass the user.username. And we can repeat this procedure for the name, bio, and the image too. So we can say if user info exists, then user info.name, bio, or image, else simply do the other thing. So now if we save this and try one more time, we can say JSM masterclass, and here we can say masterclass, and we can say this is my bio, and third time's the charm. If we click submit, it's going to throw us an error because still the username (lowercase) is not a function. So let's see if we are properly passing it in. If we go to the user data, which is coming as user to the account profile, and then here, oh, the error could be here. We're passing the update user. And in the meantime, I was messing with the way that we're passing the props. So if we go into it, you can notice that here before we were accepting them just as a list of different strings into it. But I told you that trick to simply put them within an object. So for you, this could potentially be working all along, but I have to switch this back to what I told you to do. And once that is corrected, we can now, for hopefully the fourth time, enter this, choose our name, enter our bio, and click submit. And there we go, we're back. And if we go to our profile, you can actually see all the data here. It's great to see that PNG profiles work as well, because now this one has no background. Wonderful. Almost all parts of our application are done. I hoped you guys would put some better threads right here instead of just some simple ones, but hey, once it's actually deployed, all of you will be able to use the final version of the application. Now, while we're on the topic of the final version of the application, we are incredibly close, but we're not there yet. I mean, we have all of the pages. We have the community details page where you can see the members. You can traverse to their profiles to see that as well. You can look at the thread detail pages and even leave comments, as Srajan already has here. And all of this is pretty cool stuff. But there are a couple of parts of this application missing. Do you know which ones are those? Well, if you check the full final application, you're going to notice that the communities as well as the search have the search bars, right? So that's one part that you can add to further improve this application. There's also this little comment thing, which I would like you to implement on your own to try it out. So try to fetch different comments that we have and show the number of replies below each one of these posts. It's the little things, right? This was a big application, and it's possible that not every single part of it for you is working perfectly, which is totally okay because I'm here for you. Whenever something is not working, or if you want to check out the finished code for new features that haven't been implemented yet, the link to the completely finished project's GitHub repository is going to be down in the description. There, you'll be able to reference the final code and ensure that your code is working as it should. So with that said, the final part that is left for us to do right now is to show you how to deploy this application so that once you finalize it, you'll be able to deploy it as well. I mean, as a matter of fact, you can deploy it with me right now and then continue working on it for years to come because there's so much more stuff that we can add to this. And that's the beauty of web development and the beauty of learning through project-based applications. So let me show you how we can deploy this application right away by killing our second terminal, stopping this one from running by pressing Ctrl+C and then Y, clearing it, and then running git add dot git commit -m, implement all the features, and then git push. This is now directly going to be pushed to our GitHub repository. And with that, it's also automatically going to get pushed to Vercel. So you can see that right now our project is building, and in about 30 or 40 seconds, we'll be able to see it live. If you go under deployments, we can see that we are now live. So let's go ahead and go to project and click visit. We can close all of the other tabs and we can expand this to see it fully. And as you expand it, you'll be able to see the app in its full glory. But not only that, you will have also expanded a hidden task that I was keeping for you here all the time. And that is the right sidebar that we can only see on full HD devices. There, you can fetch all the suggested users, maybe even think of a specific algorithm to figure out who your users might be interested in, as well as all the communities. It's nothing more than simply taking what we already have in the search, profile search, as well as the communities. Simply take those and put them here as well for easy access. I want you to be able to build stuff yourself and not just forever be stuck in tutorial hell. That's why, especially on these harder videos, I want you to fully dive into the final repository code. Figure it out. Heck, even use additional clerk functionalities, because that's what real learning is all about. And let's not forget to take a look at our app on the final deployed mobile version as well, which is just looking phenomenal, especially with that bottom navigation. So with that said, amazing job for coming to the end of this phenomenal tutorial. Huge thanks to Clerk for making it possible, not only by sponsoring this video, but by creating such a phenomenal piece of software that significantly simplified the authentication process, while at the same time making it so much more robust. And if you came to the end of this video building it out while watching me build this for many hours, you're gonna be the perfect candidate for our masterclass. There might have been a couple of times while you were watching this and you felt stuck on a specific problem, or you didn't fully understand what I was telling you or what I was explaining. Well, I created the masterclass for that exact reason. You can build applications together in a team while getting expert mentor assistance. So think about building projects even more complicated than threads together within teams, but then having a mentor there that you can ask for help 24/7 anytime in the day. And of course, the apps are specifically crafted, up to date, and modern for you to learn as much as possible. Oh, and just so I don't forget, this is the last chance to get your Next.js 13 ebook and get prepared for the upcoming Next.js 13 Pro course that we're launching soon. The links are down in the description. With that said, once again, thank you for being a JavaScript master and coming to the end of this video, and have a wonderful day.